over here. So I'm looking for vision and one of my eyes is killing me. I don't see it.
How are you getting to you? Yeah. That was right up here. Maybe you're talking to anyone, interrupt you, I thought. Okay, all right. I'm thinking you're looking at us like, what happened? Oh, thank you, appreciate it. Put it over here.
Yeah. Thanks for being on the end. You have to really stay. It's a day.
It is a difficult song to sing because of how the notes are. It's a problem. You can tell us can't reach the octaves they'll change the key and have to do the song. If you sing oh, it gets ridiculous. That's not the way it's so that's good. Oh, it is.
Good to see you.
All right. How's it going? Good to see you this morning. All right, let me grab.
Everybody else is the eyeball.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Where you going there, bro? Long time, been all right?
No, it's very much like I forgot to take a lesson too. He didn't get sacked, that was a great sack.
How are you? Good, how you doing? Good, this one's you are too.
Good to have everybody with us this morning. Go ahead and get started into our class. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39, dealing here with the area of Joseph over Potter's house, where he's taken there to Potiphar's house, and also how he ends up in jail. And so we'll be looking at that area. Just begin here real quick. If someone wants to just nail off the 4 divisions of the New Testament, go ahead and do it. Somebody give me all 4 of them. Gospels, history, letters, and prophecy. All right, good deal. That'll work. Good deal. Everyone got it. Now, give me all the letters. Someone name each book. Come on. No, we'll do that later. All right, we're good. All right, so it's good to have everyone with us as we get into this. As we look into this, we're going to remember our timeline. Our timeline period now, we're actually at 1900. It's about 1900 BC. I forgot the BC. That's all right. 1900 BC, we have Potiphar, Joseph, of course, and right down in this area. Joseph is not in jail yet, but he's going to be in jail as we get into this area here. And then also just to remind us of where we are on our map. So we know we've been in Canaan. We've been in the land of Canaan over here. And we know that we went from Hebron up to Shechem, then up to Dothan is where Joseph went to. And we know that Joseph was taken there by his brothers, put in a pit, and sold off. And they've taken him all the way down here, come around down here into the area of Egypt. And as we get into the Egypt area, the Potiphar's house would more than likely been in the central area. There's nothing you can pull up on the line to try to figure out where it was and so on. But with it being the Pharaoh's prisoners, there that he deals with, and then his house, he's the captain. More than likely, he's right there within the area of what they consider the major city of finding there. So as we look at this here, see, I don't think I have anything else there. Nope. So as we look at this here about Genesis 39, we would say, what an unexpected turn of events Joseph has just experienced. Joseph was 17 years old, of course, we've already mentioned that. His older brothers hate him. They hate him so much they wanted to kill him, is what we read about. But rather than kill him, they decided to sell him off some passing traders at the Ishmaelites, figuring that he will not survive what is in store for him, and then they won't be accused of murder or anything doing like that. As we see that God, of course, gave Joseph these dreams, the dreams that were there, and they showed that he would have authority over his brothers, and he would actually end up having authority over his dad also, his stepmoms, his whole family. He would have that authority over them at one time. But now he finds himself in Egypt, far from his family, long ways, 3,000 miles, and far from the promised land. As we look at this, we're looking at where God is in the midst of suffering that's taking place with Joseph, but also at the same time, the suffering we see, he's going to be tempted, beyond what most people be tempted is just a continual temptation. And we'll talk about as we go through that. It is certainly an important question to ask as we would think about this, as Joseph's life has been completely turned upside down, dealing with everything that's going on. How do you survive it? How did he get through it? How do you continue to have faith in God as you're going through all these situations? So to start that, let's go ahead and look at this area here, and we'll begin with verse 1. If someone would like to read verse 1 for us, Genesis 39, please.
Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there.
Thank you. So here we see that, Potiphar is an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guards. He is one who buys Joseph. They sell him to him, and from the Ishmaelites. And now if you were Joseph at this moment, here it is. What would you, if you're Joseph at this moment, what would you be thinking about God? Think about what he's gone through. You're rejected by your brothers. You're rebuked by your father. You're sold into slavery, and you're purchased by an Egyptian officer. Would you think that God had abandoned you at this point? You think most people, that's where their mind would be? Most people, that's where they would be probably. They'd be thinking, what happened? Well, what have I done? Is God not in Egypt? Well, I was told God is everywhere. Was he not in Dothan? What's going on here? And he starts thinking about all these things. You think that most people, regular person, you think would think that. What would people say? You must have maybe done something wrong, right? To put you in that predicament. Remember we saw that with which person in the Bible? Remember he tried to run away from God. We saw Jonah, you think about this and we see that, and, and everything he's going. Then you have Job also, as we said, Job, all his friends coming to him, and that's what I meant, I said Job. Job, all his friends coming and saying, you sinned, that's why you've done something wrong against God, that's why you're going through all this. And we know that wasn't the case at all. It would be easy to think, that God's revealed dreams had failed, and that God did not care about Joseph anymore. But if we come to that conclusion, I'll just tell you right now, we're wrong. It's not the right conclusion. Why? Because of verse 2. Someone go and read verse 2 for us, please. Oh, my clicker's doing it again. All right, someone read verse 2 for us.
The Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, in the Egyptian.
Thank you. So what does it say about God and Joseph? What does it say? The Lord was what?
With it.
Was with Joseph. So this shows us that God, the Lord, has never left Joseph at any time. He hasn't pulled away from him whatsoever, and wouldn't think that Joseph was not alone. In other words, it looks like when you read this that he was alone in Egypt without a doubt, but he was not. And it's so great to understand. The Lord was with Joseph, and nothing in the text tells us that God. And this is what's interesting. Nothing in the text ever tells us that God told Joseph, "I'm with you." Or we understand, or Joseph knew this. We do know that things prosper in the house, of course, while he's there with what's going on. But we never read in the text that he had another dream. Something went on at this moment. God said, don't worry about it, relax. I've got you taken care of. We don't read that anywhere. Did you have a comment?
And again, there's nowhere that we read this, but Joseph had to have, in a sense, kept his faith in God for God to say that he was with him. 17 years old. A lot of 17-year-olds, they're thinking about worldly things.
Right.
Here's Joseph in a different situation.
That's exactly right. And it tells us something also about Joseph, his whole time, coming up, because remember, God chose Joseph, and for this moment, God chose Joseph for what would happen. God, already gave him the dreams, about having authority and so on. So when we look at these words here, remember, these words that we're reading, they weren't written by somebody that was there during that time. They're written by who?
Moses.
By Moses. God gave him this inspiration to write these words of what is there. And I'll tell you this right now. Someone said, well, Moses wrote it. He just wrote a fictional story in the book of Genesis. I'll tell you what, you go through the book of Genesis, and if you're writing a book for a novel or something, you would have wrote it totally different. I guarantee you. Because God doesn't only talk about the good things of his people, but he talks about the what? The bad things too that they've done wrong. And usually when you look at that, you're going to leave that kind of outside and everything, and you would make these great people look like, like Superman and so on, and we just don't see that. So as we look at this, we see the things that are happening going with Joseph, which brings us to verses 3 and 4. Or notice these verses here, 3 and 4, please.
And his master
saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. Then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority.
Thank you. Now here's what's interesting. This is kind of interesting. When you think about the Egyptians, do we see them worshiping God in heaven? No. Have they dealt with God in heaven? No. Have anybody dealt with him yet? We're not at that point, are we? Where we would say with Moses, when we get to that way, that's down the road quite a way still, as we would see it's happening. But I want to show you, Potiphar somehow recognizes that the Lord was with Joseph. And that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. Joseph, we understand, is not living as if the Lord was not with him. Joseph is not talking as if the Lord was not with him. He's speaking and acting and living, saying all this that happens is from who? It's from God. Once again, Joseph is in a terrible circumstances. Joseph has been ripped away from his family. Joseph has been transported to a foreign land. Joseph went from favored son to a rejected man, or a young man, we would say even that. But the Lord is with Joseph, and Potiphar sees this, that he's with him. So then Potiphar makes Joseph what over his house? He makes him the overseer. What does an overseer do with a house? I think the answer is in the word, right? But the overseer, you're overseeing how much of the house?
he had authority over all of it.
He said he had authority over All of it that we see. In fact, notice verse 5. Let's go a little further. Someone go and read verse 5 for us. Come on, there we go.
So it was from the time that he had made him overseer of his house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessings of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field.
Thank you. So we need to notice here real quick. God is not blessing the Egyptian. We need to get that. These were people that worshiped many false gods. Remember, all these different false gods and so on. And he is not blessing Potiphar. He's blessing the house through who? It says through Joseph. Joseph was elevated, of course, to care of Potiphar's house. He was found faithful in the service, and the whole house was blessed from his glory. It's so important to understand. The whole house was blessed. Not even the house, it says the what? Even out in the fields. You know, you would think that people start, what this is telling us here is that things are better with Joseph there than they were when he wasn't there. And everybody's got to be looking around probably thinking like, wow, what's up with Potiphar? Wow. He's, things going pretty well for him. He's doing really good. And it's not just because he's a captain or something. Did he get a raise? What's happening here? And that's not at all. It's all this because of Joseph. So things appear to be turning around for Joseph, right? I mean, they seem to be getting better, don't they? Seem to get a little bit, without a doubt they do. But maybe, just maybe, there's a light finally at the end of this dark, miserable tunnel that he's been going through. Well, let's look at verse 6. It's actually the first part of verse 6. Come on, there we go. Someone read that for us, please.
And Joseph left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate.
Think about that for a moment. I mean, you just think about that for a moment. Here is a person that was a slave that was made that, and so here's this in the servitude to this man, Potiphar, and as he's there, Potiphar makes him the overseer, but it doesn't only just say, here, I want you to oversee everything I'm doing. I'm checking you daily to make sure, things are doing well. Potiphar basically just does what?
He gives it all to him and lets him worry about it.
You take care of it all. I'm not worried about it one bit. If you had somebody working for you, I'm not talking, if you had somebody working for you, and they haven't been with you long, what is the possibility that you're going to say, just take over all my finances, take over everything I have, don't worry about it, I put it all in your hands and I trust you? Is that hard to do?
It'd be rare.
It'd be very rare. It's exactly right. Very rare. And that's what we have the story, how rare it is. Do we read of that anywhere else in the Bible, really? Do we? We might think Moses. Well, no. Moses wasn't put over everything. So we see this, Joseph, this is what we read about how great this is. Then go ahead.
Kind of a modern day application. Think about it. Think about all of these famous sports figures, movie stars that put their trust in their manager to take care of everything, and they think they have all of this,
Yeah.
and guess what? The manager gets fired, and then they find out they have nothing left because they thought they could trust that individual. They can't.
Look at how many rich people like that. It could be anything, from a star athlete to a movie star or whatever, and that are in trouble with the law because of taxes. And they gave it to somebody else to take care of it all. I don't even want to know about it. Don't tell me, just take care of it. And they find out that person hadn't been doing what? Hadn't been paying those taxes. They've been pocketing and had money taking it. And you look at this. So what I'm trying to get at is, I want you to understand how much trust Potiphar had in Joseph. I mean, he had all the trust in the world in him. All the trust in the world, without a doubt. Then we see this next part of this verse, and at first it seems kind of out of place all of a sudden to just say this about the way Joseph looks, but it's important to get this because of where we're about to go. So someone go and read 6b for us.
And Joseph was a good person and well favored.
Thank you. So Joseph, we see here think about this for a moment. Joseph was a good-looking guy, wasn't he? I mean, that's what it sounds like as we look at this here, and this is where we get into the next problem. This is where all this is leading to. First of all, it's leading to show us that, God can help us during times of suffering, and we see that happening with Joseph. But now we get to this next point. Things are going good for Joseph, but things are about to get bad, as we see once again. And I want you to notice what I wrote up there. Joseph isn't one time tempted by Potiphar's wife. Isn't, one or two times. He is continually, we'll see, because the Bible tells us this, tempted by Potiphar's wife to lie with her. So as we look at this here, let's go ahead and think about that Joseph finds himself in this situation, and first we're told he's a good-looking guy, he's handsome in appearance and body. So everything about him, is enticing, I guess you would say, to Potiphar's wife. And it brings us to this verse here. Let's go ahead and read 7 through 9 and see notice how it reads about Potiphar's wife and about Joseph and what's going on here. So I'm going to read that, please.
And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused and said to his master's wife, Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand.
Come on. There we go.
There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?
You think Joseph could have been any clearer than that? That's pretty clear, wasn't it? I mean, everything, I can do whatever I want in this house except for one thing. I can't have you. You're Potiphar's wife. And so, I mean, what I want to get here, I don't want anybody to get the thought that she misunderstood it. It'd been one thing if Joseph would have said, don't bother me, I don't want to be bothered. That's different. But here he comes straight out and tells her not only I can't, but tells her why he can't. Makes it very clear. So she starts looking at him longingly, longing for him, and starts making an offer to Joseph, and she starts telling Joseph to sleep with her. And now, as we see this, Potiphar and his wife are in charge of Joseph and other, people in the house, and she's telling him to do something, and she's probably in a sense like, you know who I am? Think about this. My husband, you're under my husband, but at the same time, you're under who? You're under me in a sense. And all this is there. What a command and what a temptation that she brings forth to him. And, and remember, he is only how old? About 17, maybe a little older now. We don't know how much time has gone by now, but this is the way to look at it. He's a young man, and we see this, which brings us to verse 10. Dad, go ahead before I get there.
The last part of that verse is very important. How can I do this great wickedness? And who's he sinning against? Not Potiphar, but against God.
Yep, and we'll come back to that. You're exactly right as we see this. So let's look at verse 10 real quick here. So I'm going to go and read it for us.
So it was as he spoke to Joseph day by day that he did not heed her, to lie with her or to be with her.
Okay, I want you to catch this here. How often does it say she's doing it?
Day by day.
How often does that mean?
Every
Every day, right? I mean, and we know day by day, we don't know what that meant. 5 times in a day, 7, 8 times in a day. Whenever she's able to get him alone in a day or get, you try to get the others out of there. See, here's what we have, and I think it's real important here to understand. It says to lie with her, or, here it is very important, those aren't the same thing of a sexual encounter here. He's talking about lie with her, or even just basically be alone, what? With her. He didn't even want to be alone because he knew what could probably happen, but he also knew what that would look like and how bad that was. So this was not a one-time offer. She spoke to Joseph every day and just continually tempting him with everything that's going on. But here's the reasoning Joseph provides. We just mentioned it. I want to go back to there. I want to go back to verses 8 and 9. And notice once again, and as we see here, I'm going to go ahead and read this. We read it once. It says, But he refused to say to the master's wife, Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. Very clear. There is no one greater in this house than I. So he's like, I'm the top dog in here. I mean, I'm the one, outside of your husband and you. And he says, nor has he kept anything back from me because you are his wife, except for her. And then he says, this word's all important. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Joseph said, guess what? Potiphar trusts me, number one. He trusts me with the care of the house, and no one is higher than running this house. But he also says, God is trusting me to do his will. Now think about that for a moment. And the reason we understand it is because Joseph knows what God wants of him. I want to ask you this. How much of the Mosaic law has been written yet?
None.
None of it. They're under what we would call the what?
Patriarchal.
Patriarchal law, which we also see existed even during the Mosaical law with different people, we understand, but here it is, the patriarchal law. Everyone's like, well, where is it? Where was it written down? And so on. God, it came, how did it come to the people?
By voice.
It came by voice, it came verbally. And it's interesting, when people say about, I'll just say it's babies, born sinful. And we know that's not the case at all. Babies aren't born that way whatsoever. Babies, when they're born, we see them start growing up, there is morals just automatically in our DNA. It's there. Doesn't mean we don't need to be taught them. We need to be taught them without a doubt, especially nowadays. People need to be taught them more and more often. But there's something in a human being to do good. And that comes from who? God. So Joseph didn't only have the way he was brought up, but he also had, as we understand, what he knew himself. But what's interesting, it sounds like the majority of his brothers didn't turn out the same way, did they? If not all of them. They had problems. There were things going on. They didn't seem to be looking at God in the same way. So this gives us a very important insight to the faith of Joseph. That's what I want us to see here. Even though his brothers wanted to kill him, sold him, slavery, even though they rebuked him, his father, and even though God has given him his dreams, his brothers were envious of him, Joseph, through all this misery and time, is still trusting God. I wonder how often Joseph prayed to God, God, make this woman leave me alone. You wonder about that. Because they were praying back then too, weren't they? Without a doubt, they were talking to God. And even though his life had been completely turned upside down, with all his plans and dreams having been ripped away from him, but his dreams, what he dreamed, because he's like, I don't see where it's going from here. Joseph, once again, is still trusting God. In other words, Joseph doesn't only care about what worldly people think, like Potiphar and so on, but he also truly cares what God thinks. And if we would live like that, think about our life. If we would always look at things that way. See, Joseph realizes just because he has been put in a bad situation does not excuse him to sin. Think about how easy Joseph could have done this. Said, well, God, you put me in this situation. You won't make this woman leave me alone, so okay, I guess I'll go ahead and do what she wants. He could have thought that way. Think about how often today people choose to sin because they do not like how their life is going. They just don't like how their life is going. Think about how often people excuse their sins because they do not have the life they want, or maybe the circumstances that they're in are too hard, so sin seems to make it easier. Or Joseph is in the same position, and yet shows great integrity. Faithfulness to God is to do, brethren, what is right when no one is looking, when no one's watching. Because how many of Joseph's family members saw what was going on? None of them. Even though his brothers may not have cared. His dad, you think, would have. You would think Jacob would have done that. But what he knows is that God is watching. See, we are to have such self-control that we too can be trusted. This is what we're reading in these verses. Does Potiphar seem to be worried at all about Joseph? Even, this is important to understand, does Potiphar seem to be worried that Joseph at times may be in the house alone with his wife? No.
Potiphar had to believe in God pretty strongly himself in order for him to be able to trust Joseph the way he did. Because he knows what the actions of a man of God is like. If a man is truly a man of God, he knows that he's a good man.
That's exactly right.
He wouldn't ordinarily know that unless Joseph demonstrated something before him or something came from God to let him know.
That's exactly
Joseph
right.
was a man of God.
That's exactly right. And like Brother Clifford says there, you think about, I don't know how many times I've read this and I wondered, was it just Joseph or somebody else, introduced God to Potiphar sometime in his life and so on. And we don't read about it, but you think Joseph probably told at all, because he was already trusting God. He said, you think maybe it came up, who do you worship, Joseph? Who do you look to? Because remember, worshiping idols was a big thing to the Egyptians. Worshiping something. It was very very important and big to them. And so here's Joseph, at the same time, which one of our gods do you worship? Possibly asked Joseph, like, I don't worship your gods. I look to who? I look to the God. You know, and you think about that. There's so much here, you know, we have so much time pushed in this little tiny area of this book. And you know, and when we don't know all the situations. But I believe it comes back to Brother Clifford, what he said there was, you know, understanding that Joseph was living a life as God would have it. Potiphar was seeing things in him, and more than likely they talked about it. And we see that. I mean, and we know this is important because of what the outcome is going to come after this, after we see everything getting out. Dad, go ahead.
Continue on, Brother Clifford said, you know, these people believed in all these gods. They respected them, and they also respected the gods of other people. Because when they traveled, they had to take their gods with them.
Right.
Because that God didn't go. And so here's Joseph now explaining somehow, some way, to Potiphar. And Potiphar looks at his own people that are around him, believing in all these gods, and they're not doing the same thing, respecting their God and paying attention where Joseph is. And he said, you know, maybe he's saying, there's got to be something about this God.
Right. And that's it. I mean, because Potiphar has probably more than likely never, ever experienced what he's experiencing, has he? More than likely never has. And he's a captain. He's had servants for years, you know, and we see this, and we see this happening. And so, with all this taking place, you know, I think back all the way. I mean, I'll get a little off here. I'll chase a rabbit for a second, but to you know, think about this for a moment. You know, you go back to Rachel. You know, and you go back to when Jacob and her, and what did she want to bring with her? Remember? The idols. And you know, so there was something in their family besides God. You know, there was something probably being carried, their baggage and so on, and we see this, and so we look at this and we wonder why maybe some of Jacob's sons, or all the majority of them, why they turned out the way they did. Now, I'm not saying it's because of Rachel, I'm just saying because they were introduced to quite a bit of stuff. And remember, even with his concubines, these other, you know, their mothers, they didn't just only believe in God. That's not the way we see that. So it's so important to look at how Joseph, it's remarkable to see what he came out of and who he is right now at this age. It really is. You know, brothers, so when it comes down to us, you know, I want to point out this point here, that you and I are expected to practice integrity, self-control, regardless of the circumstances. It does not matter what he or she says to us. It does not matter what he or she, I would say, is wearing. It does not matter how he or she is tempting us. We can all say what? No. Just like Joseph. We can still practice self-control. We should, you know, be a man or a woman that can be faithful and trusted in any situation. You know, it did not matter how seductive or enticing Potiphar's wife was toward Joseph. We don't know what else she was doing. We don't know what she was wearing in those moments, what she was doing. She was trying to do everything she could to get him in the bedroom. That's what we see. But he said no, not for her or Potiphar, but mainly it was for who? It was for God. See, he knew if he put God first, all the other things would fall in place, right? They just fall right in place. Is that any different for you and I today? You know, we look at these stories and we wonder, why does God give us these stories? Just to show us where the Jewish people came from? If that was the case, you just would have went through, you know, gone through, you know, chronological order, things happen here, this here. But God shows us all the stories and everything behind it and the details that are there to teach us how to be better. So now let's look a little further. So we're verse 11, 12. I want you to notice this very integrity we see Joseph possessing in these verses that talks to us. So I'm going to read that, please.
But it happened about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside. Then she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside.
Thank you. So you know, here we read, you know, she tries to catch Joseph. She's tired of just asking him. Now she's actually going to take hold of him. Take hold of him and grab him and say, come on, you're going to be with me. He leaves once again. Guess what? In a sense, gets ripped off him, his robe. You know, you think about it. The second time that Joseph broke over his tunic, you know, and more than likely in there, it probably doesn't tell us if that's just the way the Egyptians were. If you were a sign of authority, you wore something different than everybody else. So once again, he's been stricken of this authority in a sense, or this elevation of his role has kind of been stripped away from him. She claims that Joseph attempted to sexually assault her in these verses, is what she says. So I'm going to read here and see what it says to us.
And so it was when he saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought in to us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it happened when he heard that, I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside.
Thank you. So we don't need to add any to that. It's pretty self-evident what's going on with taking place, which brings us to these next verses, 16 through 19. Someone read that for us, please.
So he kept his garment with her, so she kept his garment with her until his master came home. Then she spoke to him with words like these, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to me to mock me. So it happened, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. So it was, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, your servant did to me after this manner, that his anger was aroused.
Thank you. I mean, once again, you know, she tells this huge lie, lies to Potiphar. She doesn't want to get caught in the trap, and you know, in the situation that she was the one that brought this on. Of course, she could have easily just taken his robe and done what? Thrown it away, given it back to him. More like giving it back to him than nothing happened at all. But notice what happens. She is at the point, I believe, that she knows nothing's going to happen between her and Joseph. So what's the best thing to do? I'm just going to get rid of him. I mean, that's what we see here. So here we get into verses 20 and 23. We see that Joseph trusts God how often? Always. We see this throughout his life. We see this throughout his mission of what he's doing and what he's about. And we understand the importance as we find this coming here. In fact, have you ever in your life felt like just when things were starting to look up, life came crashing down? You know, that happens in this life, doesn't it? You know, Joseph just started to see a light, we said earlier, in the darkness. He, you know, as we said, all this that he's been going through, things were, you know, not going good, and then it's going great. He's like, yes, I'm over the household. God's blessed me. God is blessing Potiphar and everything with it. And then all of a sudden, all this hits. And we read verse 20. Someone go and read it for us, please.
And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prison was confined, and he was there in the prison.
Thank you. So now Joseph's been falsely accused of a crime and a sin that he did not what? He didn't commit the sin, not whatsoever. Now Joseph finds himself in even worse circumstances than he already was. Think about it, now it's even bad, worse. He's in a prison where the king puts his prisoners. I mean, he doesn't know what's going to happen to him now. You know what I mean? This is bad people. But we continue to see that Joseph has done no wrong. Joseph did not do anything to deserve this outcome. Joseph is innocent, and yet, in a sense, he's in a pit again. All over again. And now at this point in your life, here it is. Let's go back to us. What would we think God was doing with us? Would we think God abandoned us? Again, most people probably would. And at this point, you know, with another unfair downturn in your life, like, what is God doing? Which brings us to these verses. Let's read verse 21 here, and then we'll read 22 and 23.
And the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy, and he gave him his favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison.
And then 22 and 23, please.
And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever they did there, it was his doing. The keeper of the prison did not look into anything that was under Joseph's authority, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper.
Wow. I mean, it seems like wherever Joseph goes, have you ever, who was the one that whenever they touched him, it turned to gold? What's that? Yes. And you think about that, those things, when you think about those areas, you look at it and you see it, and you watch how much movies of it, TVs of it, you've read about it. But here's Joseph. Joseph doesn't need to touch stuff, turn to gold. All Joseph needs to do to make things prosper for him and for things to work out right, to come out right, all he needs to do is what? Obey God. Follow God. And that's what we see him doing. And how important that is. See, the Lord was with Joseph when Joseph was put in charge now of the prison. The keeper of the prison was not concerned. Here it is. Just like Potiphar now, the keeper of the prison, he's not concerned while Joseph's in charge, right? He's like, hey, Joseph's going to make me look good. I know what he did with Potiphar's house. Things are great. And, and we're little Potiphar's kind of in his misery, kind of like, what have I done? Because things won't be going so well for Potiphar anymore as we see this. So as we get ready to close this, I want to ask you this, so how can we continue to trust God when life does not go according to plan? How do we do it? Here's the first thing. Here's the first thought to think about. We must acknowledge that trusting God does not mean there will be an immediate reward. We need to get that. Because most people think, not to say most, a lot of people think, if I'm going to go to God, what do I expect?
Something in return.
If I'm going to go to Jesus, if I'm going to go, I expect something back for that. I'm giving my life, I need something. God's up there going, what are you talking about? I already gave you something. I gave you the most important thing that meant to me. His son. I think this is true that many people, including Christians, struggle with from time to time. They may feel like they should be rewarded for doing what is right, or they should have a present reward for doing the right thing. But I want us to see that Joseph's life goes into the pits because, here it is, his life gets bad because he is doing right. God, something's wrong here, right? That don't make sense. That don't make sense at all. Really? See, Joseph's faithfulness to God, Joseph's life goes from bad to worse, and this leads us to a very important truth to absorb into our hearts. Unpleasant outcomes for our faith does not mean God is not with us. We have the temptation to quit on God, and we feel like we've been forsaken. My life is not going right according to my definition, and it may feel like God does not seem to care. Therefore, I'm giving up on God. But that's not how it works. I want us all to really look at this from the life of Joseph. I believe that's why God gave us these words this way, because he knew we were all going to go through. Joseph had the terrible things happen to him, but he never stopped trusting God. Second, I want you to think about this. God can bless us in the pits. He can bless us in times of sorrow, in times of pain, when things are there. When the hard things are to deal with, and the pits, sometimes is how God can still be with us. Now you need to get this. God doesn't make us suffer. God doesn't put us in bad situations to hurt us. Everything we go through in this life, if we have God in our life, we will grow from it. We will learn from it and be better. And that's what we see with Joseph here. Which brings us to our questions. I have a minute and a half. Wow, I did pretty good. Minute and a half, yeah. So here it is. Let's all go to this. Any questions or comments before we close from there? Hopefully you understand the importance we see in Joseph and what we can take and learn from it too in this situation. Number one, name the land where Jacob's family lived. Where Jacob's family lived. Land of what? Canaan. Land of Canaan. That's exactly right. Where is it on the map? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Which one? Which one is Canaan? Anybody got a guess? Does everybody agree? Anybody disagree? Anybody not sure? Alright? Alright, we're going to go. Here it is, right here. Oh, I didn't have it on there. It's right here. It's number one. Number one is the land of Canaan, yes. Remember, they were in Hebron. They went up to these areas. And this is where God's people lived. That's where they're living now. Where are they going to be going to soon? They're going to be going right here. And in Goshen, we'll see in this, fertile, the best area of all of Egypt. And it's Mark, we'll see when we get there. All right, let's do another question here. Come on, there we go. How old was Joseph when he brought his father the bad report about his brothers? How old was he? 17. You got that right. All right. Why did Jacob send Joseph away? Remember in Genesis 37, why did he send him out of the house? To go check on his brothers. He said, they're in Shechem. Go check them out. Found out, of course, they were in Dothan. Raised this one. While deciding what to do with Joseph, what did the brothers do with him at Dothan? Threw him in a pit. And what else did they strip him of? Very important. Stripped him of his coat and took it and dipped in blood and everything, we know, and then it was sent to his dad. And so, yes, but that's what we see. All right, any comments, questions before we close? I'm exactly right on time. Anybody else?
Say that,
Go ahead, brother.
good things do happen to bad people, and it rains on the just as well as it does the unjust.
That's exactly right. And you know, and that's, and we can't, you know, and sometimes people will look at somebody that's an evil person, not being run by God, and it seems like they're prospering with everything. And you're like, why is God doing that for them and doing this for me? God's not doing that for them. We need to get that. They're living the high-minded, worldly life they can, and it's all about the devil, what the devil wants. And when we live by God, God may make us prosper on this earth, but He also may not have us prosper on this earth. But we do know without a doubt, we all have a reward. We have a reward that's in heaven. But I want you to understand, we have a reward while we're here too, being part of the church family and the importance behind it. Dad, go ahead.
That's kind of what I was gonna say, back where it said that Joseph was blessed by God. What is that blessing for us? I can think of three things. One, the Word of God. We got that to rely on when we have those problems. Prayer, above all, and, as you just mentioned, our family here.
Right.
Three great blessings that sometimes we may not remember.
Yep, that's exactly right. And that's how we have to look at it. It's just not the blessing we're looking forward to. And we are blessed here. And and if we put God first, I guarantee you're going to be blessed in many, many, many things. And besides those three, and we see that they are great. Those are three great things for sure. All right, we'll go ahead and in there. Thank you for your time.
As long as they put it in. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Well, I'm pretty much over
I almost slipped out of my hand.
Just disappeared.